Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 461, and my guest is Andrea Leeb. Her memoir, Such a Pretty Picture, powerfully narrates her life and offers an honest insight into a survivor's journey. I read the book and before I spoke with Andrea, and it is superbly written. It's easy to read. It flows really quickly. It is intense. I got mad. I got sad. I felt triumph for her. It's really something. And you can pre-order it now. It's available on all the places you get books. Highly, highly, highly recommend. Trigger warning, incest, sexual assault. This is a big episode as far as the things that it might stir up in you listeners, and I want to make sure that you are prepared and take care of yourselves and practice self-care. Andrea is also a retired lawyer. She's a former nurse and has written for numerous literary journals. She also advocates for survivors of sexual assault, volunteering at the UCLA Rape Treatment Center and Stuart House, and mentoring young women from post-conflict and climate-challenged countries. She's a badass. If you or anyone you know is experiencing incest or sexual assault, please contact the National Sexual Assault Hotline. It's 1-800-656-4673. You can reach out to rain.org. That's RAINN.org. If you're living overseas, you can call RAIN at +1 202 501 4444. Talk to somebody you trust. Tell a teacher or a safe parent or a safe family member, and there's help out there. General stuff, check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests and the show. Check out susanruth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors. Please follow Susan Ruthism on social media. Find my music on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your music. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, it's all over the place. And thank you for listening. Be kind, be well, be love, and take care of yourself. Here we go. Andrea Leeb, welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I read your book last night.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's heavy, but also triumphant.
Yeah, I think so. I think one reviewer said it's a moving memoir of trauma with an uplifting conclusion. So
it's incredibly well written as well. I have to say, having read a bazillion books, what I really appreciated was how it's written in such a well receiving way that you could consume it at a rapid pace. It felt very much like I was there. I got mad. I got upset. I wanted to just rush in and take you out of there. It brought up a lot of stuff. I had a childhood that was abusive. So, the little girl in me wanted to go and get the little girl in you and protect her.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. It really means a lot to me. I've been a writer a long time. I didn't just one day wake up and say, oh, I'm going to write a book. I've been working, I've been writing most of my life. This book was a really hard choice to write and I really worked hard to make it consumable. I guess that would be a word. Make it easy for people, because I knew the subject is, I spared nothing in the subject. I made it really raw. I chose to do that. It was a deliberate choice because I wanted people to experience to the best that I could, what childhood victims go through. And I wanted them to feel what I felt. But at the same time, I wanted to make sure the writing was kind of fast-paced enough and quick enough so that I knew that the subject would be somewhat overwhelming at times. So I wanted the writing to be easier. So I really worked on that, to make it simple, easy for people to read.
For such a heavy subject, incredibly digestible. Even the way you set up the chapters, they moved. I write script, right? So it moves like a script.
I think I'm a visual thinker, so that's probably part of it, is I visualize things. So it might be part of my writing style anyway. But again, that was really deliberate. And yeah, digestible was more, not
Yeah.
consumable. I
I
don't
same
want
thing. I mean, I feel like that's the same thing. Such a Pretty Picture is the name of the memoir. Before we dive into just where you are now, let's go back. You grew up in New York. Just without, I want people to read the book. So clearly, we've intimated what is going on in the book, but can you give just an overview of childhood?
I'll start with just the beginning because it's easy and it's on the back of the book, so it's not a big spoiler alert. I was 4.5 when the first time my father gave me a bath. And it's an early, early memory. Truthfully, it's my clearest first memory. And I knew when he was bathing me, he asked me to let him wash me with his hand, and I could tell from his breathing and all. I was really young, but I knew there was something wrong. He scared me. And when my mother walked in to check on us, she saw what was going on. And, it was, in retrospect now, as an adult, I realized my father was masturbating. As a child, I wouldn't have known what masturbation was. She screamed, fell to the floor, and when she woke up, she was blind. My father caught her, and she was blind. And it was something called hysterical blindness. And I write that my mother stayed hysterically blind for a month, and she was, remained emotionally blind for decades. So the story is about my surviving a long-term childhood sexual abuse and other abuse, and also about realizing I kept it very, very much a secret for a long time, and realizing that, holding the secret was as almost as destructive as the abuse itself. So that's what the book is about. My hope here is to raise awareness on childhood sexual abuse, incest in particular, as well as to give other people who are still suffering or not speaking maybe the courage to speak to somebody, a therapist, a trusted friend, and also to give them a glimmer of hope that healing is possible. Because the fact that I wrote the book obviously shows that I've healed, but I have. So,
And I saw that you give some of the proceeds to Rain, which is
uh,
extraordinary.
yeah, I'm actually giving all the proceeds away. I'm really lucky that I worked as an attorney for a long time, and my husband and I talked about it when I wrote the book. And this is the book unexpectedly turned into an advocacy and a life of. I'm really realized that where I am in my life right now, I'm no longer practicing law, and I am really fully dedicating myself to advocacy on this issue. I just recently was asked to join the advisory board for UCLA Rape Treatment Center and Stuart House, and I volunteer at Stuart House once a week. I'm getting involved in other organizations. So I'm giving all the rest of the proceeds, 25% to RAIN. They run a hotline, which is national, and the rest to local organizations. If I'm speaking, I have some book events scheduled. And if I'm speaking in a community, then I'm looking up the local rape treatment center, and I'm going to be giving anything that comes from that bookstore or that event also to that local center. It's more of a, authors don't make a lot of money. This is symbolic as much as anything, let's be real, but I really want to make this, it's a passion now. Strange, I did not expect that to happen, but I've become incredibly public about this, so.
That's healing, though.
Yeah, it's a new, I call it, I thought I was healed when I started writing the book, and I was to a large extent. And, I couldn't have excavated these memories and put this on paper without a lot of therapy and a lot of healing. But it gave me another layer of healing. And to be honest, I went back into therapy when I was writing the book because I really felt the need to be in therapy again to really it's complicated, and you're telling not only your secret but the secret of your family, and I know it's going to sound really counterintuitive. Well, my father, I really didn't, I can't really say I loved him. I was relieved when he died, but my mother, regardless of her failure to protect me, I really loved her. I did. Some people might disagree with that choice, but I loved her and I kept her in my life. And it felt a little odd, kind of not that she has a legacy, but ruining her legacy. It's kind of like the author. My mother's not the author, Alice Munro, but I don't know if you're familiar with that, but she, her legacy was, her daughter, who's also named Andrea, wrote about being abused by her stepfather. And it's really changed the way people look at Alice. And it probably will change the way people look at my mother. She's passed on now, so it's a little easier.
I think when you are someone who has suffered complex trauma, for people that haven't experienced that, they don't quite maybe understand how convoluted the feelings of love and devotion, and even though you low-key hate this person, but you also love them, you want their attention, you want them to love you back, and it gets so confusing and so convoluted. And people say, well, why didn't you tell someone, or why don't you run away, or why don't you? And it's because you're also protecting your abuser.
Yes. And I was. And in the book, I write about, I write about being an adolescent and a pre-adolescent and wanting my father's attention and at the same time hating my father's attention and feeling responsible for the family and for my mother. The blindness was a really, seeing that happen at that moment in time, I internalized it. I mean, my father didn't help by telling me it was my fault, but I internalized it for a long time. I really viewed myself as responsible for my mother's protection and happiness.
And your mother's violence towards you was, her internalized rage that she couldn't touch.
Right. And yeah, my mother was violent toward me for a couple of years when I was a child, and I write about that too. It was as if she turned her rage at my father in outward toward me. And I can't speak to why my mother stayed with my father, and I'm not in her skin, but people ask me all the time whether I think she was abused, and I just don't know the answer. I mean, this kind of child abuse is generational. This kind of trauma is generational. So if I were a guesser, I would say somewhere in her family history, there was some kind of sort of sexual abuse. I would guess that, but it's far be it. My mother kept everything close.
Yeah, well, that's definitely generational. And statistically speaking, it's more likely, yes, that's true.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Do you think you would have written the book had your parents still been living?
Well, my mom was alive when I wrote the book.
I thought she had passed already.
She passed at when I wrote the epilogue. Yes. This is Pam Houston, my mentor, one of my writing mentors, said, you are not going to completely finish this book. So she was alive through many drafts of this book. My father was dead. I probably couldn't have written it if my father was alive. It would have taken a little bit more. My mother, I kept a relationship with my father for better or worse because I kept the relationship with my mother, and that he was a non-negotiable deal. What that relationship looked like, it wasn't your typical father-daughter relationship, obviously. My mother was still alive, and I was actually taking care of her on and off while I was writing it. She kind of knew I was writing the book. My mother was always the biggest supporter of my writer. I have an MFA in creative writing, and when I went back for it, and I had this night once through the new fiction series where actors read my work, my short stories, and my mother flew out, and she was so proud of me, and everything I ever published, she wanted to read. And not that I published a great deal, but I published. And she knew I was writing this, but she said, I know you're writing a book and I know it's about your father and I don't want to talk about it. So I don't know if I could have published it. I think the universe, if she was still alive, it would be a lot harder to be in this position. There's a big part of me. My mother wasn't well when I was writing it, and I knew it was more, not that I wished for her death because I didn't, but I knew it was more likely than not that she would be, writing process takes a long time, that she would be deceased by the time it came out. It did cross my mind, but yeah, yeah, that was part of why I went into therapy.
For sure. Well, I would think that therapy would be important while writing this, just because even if you felt like you were healed, it would still, your body doesn't understand timeline. Your body is feeling in the moment of the actual moment as much as it is in the future self writing it.
And I write in the book, healing is not linear. I mean, you don't walk out of any kind of program or have any kind of moment, even if you've had an epiphany, which without giving away too much, I sort of had. But even if you have an epiphany of healing, you can't walk out and one day go, oh, I'm perfectly fine. I think that, in fact, it's almost bad for people to think that way, or not healthy, not because, it puts so much pressure on you as a survivor. To be able to, you have to understand that there's steps backwards and forwards, and especially you reference CPTSD, when it's this, complex CPTSD, it's still with you. I mean, I still jump when somebody comes up behind me too closely. Your body stays. Interestingly, I found yoga through writing this book, or toward the end of this book. I was older and I'd always run and done a lot of spinning and different activities. And I ended up finding yoga as a result of this book, which has opened my body in ways that I didn't even realize. I was always kind of a head on a body.
Yeah, I understand that completely. When you move through the world, do you look around and spot kids and think, oh my God, I know something's going on?
I can see it in young women, sometimes from their posture, and sometimes from children. If I see, certain ways that if a parent is yelling at I can see children shrinking into themselves. And so it becomes more apparent. Although, sometimes it's funny because, doing the work at Stuart House, what Stuart House is a treatment program that UCLA Rape Treatment Center runs. And it's really unique because everything is at this one location, and all the police, all the therapists, so the children don't have to go running all over the place. And my volunteer work is I'm the play lady. So, which is the best job I've ever had, I must admit. And the children walk in and, wow, the first thing is they're greeted by me or another play lady or play. And there's this big playroom, which is filled with donated toys and really fun things to do. And they're say, hi, I'm here. I'm the play lady. I'm wondering if you'd be interested in playing. And watching the children when they come in, because they're scared, their body language is that body language, that turtled. They're turtled. And when they start playing, children are still really, young children particularly, are still really hopeful. They can still have those, you see it, the joy comes quickly to them. As opposed to, I think, the longer, by the time I was an adolescent or a pre-adolescent, I was pretty hardwired to feeling bad and distrustful about the world in general. But yeah, so that's been really fun, having that opportunity to be the play lady.
That's lovely. And to how important it is to rewire the idea of play, because even in the book, that was one of the things your dad said to you. I want to play with you.
Mm-hmm.
And how that becomes bastardized of what real play is versus not safe play.
Wow, you picked up on something I wasn't even conscious of. So there you go. That's really true. I had never even thought that till this moment, which gives me a note for therapy. But it's which goes to the point that we're all healing and learning from this. Sometimes what the fingers put on the page, the conscious doesn't even, we're not even conscious of. But that's exactly it. I mean, I never felt like a child, like a true child. I lost my childhood before I even experienced it, and I lost my agency before it even developed. And I don't think my story, unfortunately, is that unique to especially any survivor of sexual abuse, but also, children who grow up with violence, with hitting, with being screamed at constantly, in that really, these households where the children turn into objects of anger. And, we lose our agency, we lose our ability to be happy.
Absolutely. And I read somewhere a long time ago that physical, not sexual, but physical, the punchy kind, the slappy kind, physical abuse or pinching or whatever it is as detrimental to a child's psyche as the verbal abuse, that it's as if you're being punched if you want to, apples for apples or whatnot. And I find it I have to be very careful because it is no two people experience trauma alike. And it does not matter, in my opinion, what kind of trauma you experienced trauma. And that if we try to out trauma each other, it completely loses the point and jeopardizes the healing of it.
Correct. And I hope my book is, I know it's difficult at points to read, but I hope that it would be a message for other people who've had other kinds of trauma, because, the point is we can't out trauma each other, and we can't necessarily experience it the same way. And, in some ways I was really fortunate because I grew up in a family that loved books. And books really saved me. And the ability to read and write really was, for me, important. It allowed me some academic success and the ability to be financially independent earlier than a lot of people. And, that's truthfully where I got a lot of people ask, well, you're resilient. And I said, well, I think it's part of that. Although resilience can have a double-edged sword too. So
sure, it makes you hyper independent, which makes it very hard to operate in the world sometimes. I do want to, the book thing really stood out to me. I'm a big reader. I was a big reader as a child. This is why it's so important not to ban books, because they become a lifeline to children.
correct. And I don't think anyone, I read at a very young age, kind of precociously. I would say very precociously. Part of it was, my father, for all his bad, was a professor of English literature, and my mother was a person who I write. Books were like air to her. She loved to read, and I started. And I think it's really hard for adults to always say, well, this book is appropriate or that book's not appropriate for a child. We have to let children read at the level that they're at. I'm not saying that everybody should be reading the way that I did. Perhaps there should have been a little more monitoring, but that's a whole different issue. I don't know the answer to that. It's easy to judge. That's how children get to experience the world that's not their own.
Yeah, it's incredibly important for escape as well. If they're in situations where they don't feel like they can escape, it creates.
Well, my other option was it was either reading or self-harm. So
yeah,
and I think books are better than sticking yourself with a pin or cutting yourself.
I guess it's
say
healthier option. Do you ever get visited by your father in dreams?
Not well. I'm trying to think of the last time. It's been a long time. Not right after he died, yes. Not anymore. And I do get visited by my mother sometimes. And I've actually, this is going to sound really woo, but I do a lot of yoga. And, I've done some really intense meditative yoga experiences, or I've seen felt my mother come to me, but not my father. He seems gone. I trying to think if he's showed up recently. Maybe I had one dream where we were all together, my biological family, and there was like a flood and something was going on.
How did your sister receive the book?
Oh, my sister is my first true love. I hope that comes across in the book.
Well, I was nervous the whole time reading because I thought, oh God, please, please, it's bad enough that you're dealing with what you're dealing with.
She didn't have an easy time either. I mean, she also was hit a lot by my father. She read it early. I had her read it actually at first draft because I said, I'm writing this. I won't write it if you're not okay with it. And she was okay, and she's read it all the way through. I dedicate the book to her. I had her read it as I was writing it for two reasons. One is I wanted to make sure before I published it that it was before it got published or started sending it out for publication, that she would sign off on it because I didn't want to go any further. And I also wanted to have her read it it's all a historical accuracy. Obviously, our memories are not identical on the way everything happened, but at least, we moved a lot as children, and just to kind of get her take on particular scenes. But she's been really supportive, and she's really excited. She's excited for me because she also knows that I've been writing a long time, and she's excited that I have a book, and she's excited about this book. She's a therapist by training. She's just recently retired, but she was a LCSW, so I think she's open to the book being published.
The therapist in the book, I wanted to reach through the pages and just absolutely throttle.
Oh, the two, they were not good. I mean, the first one, the second one, I don't even give the excuse of time to, because it was already 1981, and it was out there. The first one, was in the 60s. Things were different, and there wasn't required reporting. I often wonder, my sister thinks that even though I never quite told him 100% what was going on, and you'll read the book and find out more about this, but my sister thinks that would have been required reporting at this point. There was really no one to rescue me, and the therapist that did finally help me was a woman, and actually she was an LCSW, so go figure.
Yeah. Do you have children?
I do not. I did not want to have children, and I love children, by the way, I really do. It took me a really long time to find stability. And, I write about some of it in the book. And even after the book ends, the period after, it took me a little bit longer to find someone that I could live with. And intimacy took me a long time to find. But I have a husband now that I've been married to for, it'll be 24 years next month. And we've been together for over 25. But by that time, I was 42 when I met him and 43 when we got married. We tried, but I didn't want to have kids until I was stable and until I found somebody who was stable enough to have kids with. And I just didn't find that before. It was my opportunity to break this cycle.
I completely understand that.
But I have 10 nieces and nephews, and I have 4 greats now. 3.
Your sister had 10 kids?
Oh. No, not my sister. It's on my husband's side.
Okay, I was like, wow, that's a lot. No judgment, but wow, I can't imagine.
1 kid, and my husband's got it from a big family, but they count.
Absolutely, no, for sure. One of the things, and again, no spoilers, but one of the things that happens with any kind of abuse with children is that as they grow up, they tend to, and this is a generalization, but in my experience, this is what I've seen, they tend to get into situations where abuse continues in different forms by people outside the family because it has set up a feeling about oneself. And as you mentioned, sort of that out-of-body experience or being in your head and not your body. And can you talk a little bit, especially for the listeners who maybe are experiencing that now, the journey of getting your boundaries back and what that felt like for you and how you reclaimed that part of yourself.
Well, it took a while. I mean, when I was growing up as a teenager, I write that I didn't know the difference between safety and danger. And, I interestingly enough, I actually couldn't be intimate and I got into some really dangerous positions as a teenager. As I became an adult, a lot of the men that I picked weren't really abusive. Because I didn't stay very long. I just kind of picked them to pick them. And I mean, I think the last relationship in the book, I don't know that it was abusive. It was maybe right on the border. He could, to be fair to him, I was holding secrets and not that easy to live with at that point. But I never really got into the hitting relationships. I was afraid of power. I was really afraid of men having power over me. But I think that it was more of a journey of going to therapy and starting to really look at what I was looking for in a partner. What would a partner that I would like look like? And sometimes, to be fair, I looked at the externalities a little too heavily, which isn't to say that my husband's not a good looking man, but I really went with, I really wrote that I was kind of just looking for somebody to sleep next to keep away the boogeyman. And so it took a really long, I had to mature. I don't think I became a grown woman until I was 43. And I had to mature into being a woman and work in therapy, kind of understand, what are the qualities that I think I value in myself. And those are the qualities I would value in a partner. And then how could I trust that partner to be safe?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I really started looking at my partner's family relationships, at not necessarily at what they did for a living, but who they were as people.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a process, though. I can't really point to any one moment in time. I have a moment in the book where I talk about having a conversation relationship with somebody. I won't spoil that because it's a precious moment.
Absolutely. No, it's tricky sometimes in these interviews because I want to dive in, but I also want people to read the book. So.
I know some of them people do that. I feel like sometimes I'm giving away the whole book, so why would they buy it? But I say buying the book and reading it is a whole different experience than hearing about it in a podcast.
Yeah. Also, the thing about writing about this particular topic is you are now standing on a roof and shouting about what happened. And I think the more that happens, the more people in their own lives will feel like it's okay for them to also stand up to their abusers or speak about their abuse and get that poison out instead of carrying the burden of it.
And that's my primary, one of my primary messages in the book, because that's why actually my editor and publisher helped me find the title. I struggled with titles for a long time, but when we found it, I was like, yes, because what I really believed was that and this is what my mother believed, if you created a pretty enough picture, if you were smart enough, or, externally attractive enough, or just pretended something what didn't happen, you could make that could be so. And what I learned is you can't hold these things secret. You can't bury them. I mean, some people are able to, their brains allow them to bury their memories in their subconscious. I kind of wish mine had. They come out anyway. I mean, and now there's all these newer things that are happening, books being written and stories about people using MDMA and finding their memories. I didn't ever lose mine, but I really tried to keep them buried. For a long time, I tried, trust me. But I'm glad I didn't because, it made me the person that I am today.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that could have developed into DID or any number of things.
Yeah. And truthfully, the secrets were killing me. I am very lucky that I didn't, kill myself. There were moments where I was very close without, to suicide. And I'm grateful every day that, I was able to get the help that I could. And I hope, which is part of the reason that I'm speaking and giving whatever money I can to these resources is, today so many of these nonprofits are losing federal funding, but it still exists, that there are organizations that will help even people who can't afford to get therapy themselves. The Rape Treatment Center here in LA, we're very fortunate, but other places we are as well. The Rape Treatment Center gives adults 1 year through the Rape Treatment Center of therapy, and Stuart House allows for the children to have a year as well as the non-perpetrating parent.
Wow.
That's really generous, but there are other organizations that provide services as well, and hopefully in more parts of the country,
But there's so much to the non-perpetrating parent too, that the looking the other way-ness of it all for so many families, for myself too, like showing up to school, tear-faced, bloated, crying face with a note, and nobody's saying a thing. Nobody's saying a word. And it's just the whole of it, the silence culture around it all is devastating.
It's devastating. And I think it's, you're much younger than I am. And it still happens. And, that's the issue. When I'm at Stuart House and with the play lady, I see the moms who bring their children in, and sometimes it's a dad, but sometimes it's a stepfather, or sometimes it's who knows. I don't find out much about the cases for a lot of different reasons, privacy, and also because, for court, if they do go to court. So they don't give us that information. Our job is simply to play, and which is a great job to have, like I said. But when I watch these moms, I go, God, you're my hero. Those are my heroes, is the women or men, if it's the other way, and sometimes it's a mother and a father bringing the child in because it's someone else. The parents who bring their child to therapy and are willing to acknowledge this is happening by someone to their child, those are my heroes, because I know that, there's got to be some shame connected with it, and they're able to overcome that shame for their child's well-being. It's amazing. But I also want, young women who, there's so much of this. This is, sexual abuse pervasive. Rain says 1 in 9 girls and 1 in 20 boys are sexually abused before the age of 18. And we won't even get into the women after the age of 18. That's a whole different story.
And that's just what's reported.
Right. And that's what's reported. So regardless of whether it's childhood or not childhood, or, I think the point of my book is that keeping these secrets to yourself isn't going to help you. You need to get some help. And as a society, we should be aware that this happens.
Yeah. What's next for you?
I have an old novel that is not about this, that I pulled out, that I'm kind of exploring whether I want. I took a little class on character with a writer I know, Josh Moore, who's like a really, really good character person, and recently just to have something to take my mind off of this. And I'm playing with that potentially. I'm also looking at, writing some more essays. I have found right now that this process of this book is so consuming that there's not too much time for other things. And then on a personal kind of advocacy, I want to continue that as a trajectory. Writing, I can write something else, but I do want to continue that as, I'm lucky. I call it, I'm of retirement age, but not really psychologically ready for retirement, but I'm ready to do something new. And that's what I've chosen. So I want to continue to be out in the world talking about this issue. That's what's next.
I'm curious how your relationship, if you have one, if you are an atheist, if you believe in God, how that has changed over your lifetime.
I'm kind of a person who believes in a higher power, the universe. I don't know that the universe can be called God. I don't have anything, with that term. I'm not a part of an organized religion, but one of the things that happened, I went through a period probably around college where I was just didn't believe in God at all, an atheist. But now I believe in something bigger than me. I actually do. I meditate every day and I pray every day. And I also my prayers are more about gratitude than about asking for something. So I do have a relationship with something bigger. I don't know what that looks like. And I'm not a part of any organized religion, but I'm not opposed to other people's organized religions.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tell people how they might find you.
I have a website right now. It's Andrea Leeb author.com. I think we're working on perhaps changing it, but it'll have a hyperlink. So it's Andrea Leeb author.com. And then I have an Instagram, which is Andrea Lisa Leeb. So that's my Instagram. And you can follow me. And the book can be purchased. I'm going to just give a pitch. It's my launch day, my publication day is October 14th. But it is available for pre-order now. You can get it on the Simon & Schuster website, or look on the Simon & Schuster, and there's hyperlinks. There's hyperlinks to my author website, Amazon, of course, at Bookshop, of course, Barnes & Noble. So basically anywhere where they sell books, it's available for pre-order. And the publication date is October 14th. And as I said, my royalties, because I have the opportunity to, I'm able to donate them to RAINN and other rape treatment organizations. So
fantastic. And as a person that, as I said, I read constantly, this book is very well written. It's easy to read. It's an important read.
People have an idea that this happens only in certain families or and this is not these issues, these child abuse issues are not related to socioeconomics, to race, to religion. They happen in all families. So I also wanted, no matter how, and my family had a pretty picture, it was a father who was a professor, a pretty mother, and two little girls, cute little girls. How good, how lovely is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I wish you great success. And I think it's incredible what you do and what you have survived. And I think that it's so important that beacons exist in the world because the ocean is fucking big.
Yeah.
And when we see a beacon of light that we can swim toward, it makes all the difference.
I think that's really true, right? That's a good way to say it. I love that. I might steal it.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show.
Oh my God, thank you. And thank you for saying the book was well written. That means the world to me. I mean, also because, as a writer, you want people to like your writing. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's well written. Absolutely. It's easy to read. And I don't mean that it's pedantic. It's not that. It's
I understand. But thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you this morning. It's been lovely.
Absolutely. And thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.